This is the Pepperwood Podcast, a production of Pepperwood, a non-profit conservation organization based at a 3,200-acre nature reserve near Santa Rosa, California, in the heart of the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. At Pepperwood, we aim to inspire conservation through science. And on this show, we talk to scientists, stewards, and environmental educators about what they do and how they do it. We hope to give you a glimpse into the real experiences of folks who devote their lives to taking care of local ecosystems and sharing them with others. Welcome back to the Pepperwood Podcast. Today, we're talking science with one of our valued volunteers and a bonus special guest from our science team. Pepperwood's science team has a few data collection projects that depend on contributions from volunteer scientists. These projects include the Phenology Project, which we discussed with volunteer steward Gary Morgret during the first episode of the podcast, and coverboard surveys at our forest monitoring plots, which we learned about in Season 1, Episode 3 with Michaela Freed. I've been directly involved with both of those two projects, first as a volunteer and ultimately as a staff member. But in this episode, I get to learn along with you about another volunteer-driven project, Pepperwood's Breeding Bird Survey. Something that sets research projects apart from other volunteer opportunities at Pepperwood is that they require specific training for the volunteers involved. To volunteer for other Pepperwood events like our monthly volunteer workdays, you don't need any prior experience. We will teach you everything you need to know the day that you participate. But for science projects, it often requires a developed skill set to collect quality data. In some cases, we can provide the training to help interested volunteers develop that necessary skill set, but certain skills take many years to learn. And in those cases, we need to recruit volunteers that have previous expertise. And that is very much the case for the Breeding Bird Survey. Today, we're going to hear from longtime volunteer Sean Jeane, who was essentially headhunted for the Breeding Bird Survey by Nicole Barden. Nicole was a staff member at Pepperwood for many wonderful years and still returns nearly every season to teach a birding class. Please check out our classes and events page for an opportunity to spend time in the field with Nicole at one of our birding classes. It is always a great experience. She met Sean when he was the coordinator of the West Sonoma County Christmas Bird Count. That is part of a national annual community science event organized by the National Audubon Society. It's an excellent, very long-standing project, and I'll provide a link to our local Christmas bird count in the show notes. Sean's many years of experience as a birder has helped to make him a valuable member of Pepperwood's Breeding Bird Survey team. I sat down with Sean in November of 2025 and asked him to tell me about the project, when it happens, how it happens, and how he develops the impressive bird identification skills that it takes to participate.
So the first time I came was probably 10 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. It's a springtime event, and they've been doing that since before I started. It's usually 3 times. So if you can, we had some issues with COVID that kind of killed it one year.
I'm sure, yes.
But normally you go 3 times. You start, and we have what's called a transect, and along your transect there's a certain number of stops or points that you stop and listen, and you try to identify everything you can in that spot, around that spot, in a 5-minute period.
So you set your watch for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yep.
And are you only identifying by ear, or are you using more than one sense?
It's mostly by ear. If you see them, so what we do is you walk the transect. Ours has 10 stations. I'm not sure I think they all have 10 stations. There's 4 different transects on the property.
Okay.
And I do one called Rogers Canyon.
A little more in the cut.
It's pretty rugged, and so we have to walk through there. And we had another gentleman that used to join us that didn't like all the poison oak, so he said, "I'm not doing this anymore." You
have to pick your zones when it comes to walking these transects. That makes sense.
But it's beautiful down there. We've walked down there, and we love it every time. So you go to each transect. You start. You set your stopwatch or whatever, and you count for 5 minutes, and then you just mostly listen because you're hearing probably 90% of the birds, And so you have to be able to identify them by sound.
Right.
And so you have to be a reasonably good birder to do that. Do I know all the birds? No. Every once in a while I'll hear one that I don't know, and I'm like, oh, I don't know that one.
Mystery bird. That goes in a certain column, I'm sure.
Well, it's funny because when I hear one that I know that I don't know, I know it's only a couple of things. So now
You've narrowed it down based on the whole list.
Yes, I know there's only a couple of birds around here that I don't know really well. So some of those birds are like some of the warbler species. They all sound very similar, and some I only hear really occasionally. And so I'm like, oh, I know it's a warbler. I don't know which one. So now we have this nice tool, eBird type stuff that where you can actually put it on and listen with that as well. And I sit there, I'm calling out what I'm hearing, and usually one of us, so I go with my friend John Cotting, and when we have a few others that join us, Dana Riggs, she's a biologist who tries to join us every time, but she's busy, she can't always make it, so sometimes it's just John and I. And so he's the recorder, I'm the guy who knows most of the birds, and so I yell them out, and he writes them down. And we make notations like, it's close, it's within 50 meters, I believe is the distance, or it's more than that. So we say close or far. We say whether it's singing or just calling. We say whether we see it or whether we just heard it. And we say things like, oh, this bird was carrying nest-making materials. So you're trying to identify that kind of activity, whether they're nesting or not. So it's a nesting bird survey. The fact that they're here and they're singing is probably indicative of the fact that they're making a nest somewhere.
That's the kind of singing type of calls indicate they're trying to reproduce. Great.
So we've gotten pretty, good in knowing what to expect in each of the transect locations. So the 10 spots we go down, and it's like, okay, we normally get this here. We've done it enough times now. We normally get this here. So we sort of know what to expect. Every once in a while we'll get something that we don't expect, and that's always fun. And then it's also sometimes we don't get anything. And you're like, well, where'd they all go? So you never know. Sometimes you get good results. Sometimes you get, lesser results, we'll say.
And that's probably why you have a little bit of repetition built in. You're going 3 times over the course of the season, right?
Right. So we start in April, and we like to go at least 2 weeks later, usually 3 weeks, maybe 4 even if we can, work it out. But the birds, the season is really April through early June. So we try to go kind of mid-April, mid to early May, and then very early June if we can get it.
Throughout those 3 surveys, do you tend to find like different time frames where different species are active, or are you sort of looking at the same pool of species the whole time?
When we come in April, you'll find that some birds aren't here yet. So some are migrants, right? So they're not all going to be here yet.
Okay.
Most of them are, but if 1 or 2 still haven't made it. And then the other thing we do, I didn't mention this, is that we start at the top of the canyon the first time, and we hike to the bottom, and we finish, then we hike back out. Then we start at the bottom of the canyon the second time. We hike up, so we kind of do a different order, and then we do it the other way again. It's about 2.5 miles down the canyon, then you have to walk back out.
And it's not easy walking.
Maybe 2 miles.
Right.
Not quite.
It's pretty rugged.
It's rugged, but it's not that hard.
That's good. Okay.
So we can do that.
So you're kind of getting some variation. So over the course of a couple of months, maybe you're getting a little variation in like late arrivals and maybe early leavers, and you're getting some variation from the time of the day, right?
No, we always do it. So we always do it the same time of day.
Oh, okay.
So we start at sunrise or within 10 or 15 minutes of sunrise is when we try to start, because that's when the birds are the most active and they're singing.
You're identifying why I will never be a great birder. You got to be a morning person.
I would say I'm not the most morning person, but when
I
have an event like this, I will come do it. Yes.
Very good.
So we always do it early, and what we find is that some birds will, by June, have already stopped singing. So they're probably there.
They've done their work.
But we don't hear them at that point. So generally, the first time we go out, some birds aren't here yet. So things like lazuli bunting. It's a wonderful bird. It's very bright blue, pretty, and has a wonderful song.
Wonderful song, you say? I think we ought to hear it for ourselves. Here's a recording of the lazuli bunting's song.
But when we go out the first time, we don't always hear it. It may not be here yet. The second time, we usually hear it. The second time, well, this year, in the last 2 years, we had western tanagers in one stop, or two stops maybe, in the last couple of years. But when we went out the third time, nothing. We couldn't hear them.
Ah, but what would it sound like if they did hear the western tanager?
They're there, but they aren't singing anymore. They've made their nests. They're sitting on their eggs, I guess, and they're just not singing anymore because they've done what they were singing. The singing there is over because they've done what they needed to do.
Sure.
So
Do you find that by switching directions, you said the first survey you go out, you kind of go from the top of the canyon down. Second time you go from the bottom of the canyon up. Is that trying to catch any variability in like the very first break of dawn versus, maybe, I don't know, how long does it take you to do the survey all
it takes
together?
us usually close to 3 hours.
Okay. So
it
3 hours later is a pretty big difference for a bird.
Yes.
Yes.
It shouldn't take us 3 hours, but we get distracted with, there's a cool bird over there. So we stop and do that for a minute. And
That's
then
got to be half the fun, right?
Yes. So we do a little of that. We could probably do the whole thing in 2 hours if we really needed to, but we don't ever try to go that fast. So yes, there's a variation. Some birds are singing early. Some are a little bit more later morning, I guess. And so they want us to sort of hit the spots at different times so we can capture that. Some of the volunteers here will join us sometimes, and we don't. There's a few of them that have done it a few times now, and
Excellent.
we always like having them. They're learning, and then we like to help them learn, and having an extra set of ears can be good just because we don't always hear every last thing. Especially if there's 10 or 15 species of birds all calling at once. That can be really difficult to discern every one of them. So by having people spread out, by the way, when we stop at these points, we're supposed to stay within about 30 feet of it. But if there's 3 of us, I will all go different directions and try to get in different spots. So maybe we're hearing a little bit different things.
Okay, so we're amplifying the data collection process a little bit.
Yeah, and it really makes a difference. I think if one person's doing it, they're going to miss something.
Yeah.
If you have 2 people, they're going to catch most of it. If you have 3 people, you're probably catching most of it.
How long did it take you, would you say? And I'm sure it's an ongoing process, but learning the bird calls by ear and being able to identify species.
Yeah.
How long before you felt even reasonably confident at that? And what process was that?
That's interesting. So for the longest time, I didn't try to do that. I started birding. My wife and I were in the Peace Corps, and we were given a book. And we were in Nepal, the country, and there's 800 species of birds in Nepal, and they're all really cool, bright colors, all this neat stuff. And we had a lot of downtime, so that's when I started birding. I was in my mid-20s, and when I got back, I decided I was going to keep doing it, and so I got involved with the local Audubon. And at first, it was just a challenge to try and learn all the birds, let alone try to understand, their songs.
Or to even know them by sight, if you're lucky enough to see them.
So so learning your birds, first there's sight, then there's what habitat they're in. You can kind of narrow down what kind of bird it might be by habitat. You can, I start identifying them by silhouette or habits. So how they move. Are they fast? Are they slow? Are they jittery? Those kind of things. So size. So I was learning all of that first, and it took me a long time to be at what I would say competent at identifying the birds, sometimes just at a glance. And
maybe that's all you get.
That's all you get. And some birds are so similar, you might not be able to tell exactly what bird it is, but it was a certain sparrow group,
right,
or something like that. But you might not know exactly which one. So took me probably, again, working, I'm not a full-time birder like some people who just have all day to go do it every day.
Sure.
They get really good at it.
But in your spare time?
In my spare time, it took me some years to get good at that. I wouldn't know how long. But I realized that I was missing a lot of birds because I could hear them, but I couldn't see them.
Right.
And so some birds are obvious. Even people that don't do birding probably recognize the songs of some birds like robins and some of the sparrows, blackbirds. But you haven't paid attention, you just know.
Sean is right that we all, hopefully, hear the calls of common local birds like robins and sparrows and blackbirds quite often, but I'm not sure that we would all necessarily recognize which species we're listening to. let's take a moment to listen in to those calls. Here's the American robin's song, or the robin might make a tweet and tut call like this. Here's the titular song of the song sparrow. And here is a classic conch-la-ree from a red-winged blackbird. Next time you are out in your neighborhood or local park, see if you can recognize those calls for a taste of what it must be like to be Sean and his fellow birders out there walking the Breeding Bird Survey transect. Okay, back to Sean's story.
So I started realizing that I could pay attention to that, and I started doing that by ear more. And it took me a while, but when you see a bird and you see it calling, now it's kind of reinforced in your mind.
Multiple kinds of information at the same time.
So there's audio recordings that you can try and practice with. And yes, that can be effective, but it's not quite the same.
Well, I'm at the experience of seeing a bird and then hearing its call at the same time is more imprinting on you, right?
Yeah, well, it's
exciting,
exactly right. So now I've seen that bird, I've heard that bird, I can kind of remember that. But you still have to do it regularly or you kind of forget. So I go to Texas to visit family sometimes, and there's a whole different set of birds there. I don't know all those birds. I'm learning them, but every time I go, I learn a little bit more, but then I forget a little bit because I don't go back for a few years. And then next time I go back, I'm like, okay, I recognize that, but I can't remember what it is. So you really have to do it pretty regularly to be, competent at your recognition by sound.
As spring approaches overall, and you're heading toward the season where you're going to be doing the data collection, do you find that there's like a refresh process when for all these local birds that you're used to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So first of all, I kind of bird my own yard all the time, but that's maybe 30 or 40 species. And in our area here, we probably have a couple hundred species that could come through. Or if you go to the coast, there's a whole separate set of, ocean birds and that kind of stuff. And I really don't know those because they're not there enough. But when it's time to start thinking about doing the Pepperwood breeding bird survey again, I usually spend an evening or two refreshing my memory using some apps that I have.
And then you mentioned also with eBird. eBird's an incredible application.
eBird is put out by Cornell University, I believe, and they have a ornithological center there, and they have a couple different products, and one of them is called Merlin, and Merlin is one I use to ID. If I'm not certain, or if I'm in Texas and I really don't know, I can hold out my cell phone, and it's got the Merlin app on it, and it's not 100%, but it's probably 95% correct.
Right. So essentially you have AI technology that's listening alongside you, and it's doing that same process of trying to identify, and it will give you a readout of what it thinks it's hearing.
Yeah, and it works in a lot of places, but not everywhere. So for instance, birding in Hawaii a couple of years ago, Merlin didn't work at all.
Oh, okay.
I mean, a couple of birds, but
so that data set, it's still learning.
It's still learning that set. Yeah. So it didn't help much there, but in Texas it was awesome because I'm like, I'd see the bird and really I think I know what it is, and then I would check the thing. Oh yes, that's what it was. So
right now, and you're using that more so sounds like a backup or like a
backup.
cleanup hitter.
I don't. I try not to rely on it unless I'm really somewhere I don't know anything, and then I will use it to help try to learn. But when I'm here in my local territories where I know most of the birds, I just sort of use it occasionally if I'm a little uncertain or I'm hearing a little different call that I normally hear. For instance, the other evening I was hearing some owls, and they were great horned owls, and they were making a noise I hadn't heard them make before. I'm like, is that them? And so I put the app out. Sure enough, that was them making that noise. It was a noise I'd never heard them actually make. It wasn't their normal hoots, It was a kind of a cat sound. It was like a meow almost.
I found something close to what Sean is describing in the Cornell Lab Macaulay Library, the database that generously provides us with access to the bird vocalizations that you hear on the podcast. Sean has confirmed that the following is a slightly louder, harsher version of what he remembers. Listen for the meow-like call interspersed with the well-known great horned owl hoot pattern. According to the Macaulay Library notes on this recording, this is courtship behavior between a male and female great horned owl, with the female calling and the male hooting back. Interesting.
Yeah, it was really different. So
yeah, well, that's nature for you, right? No matter how long you've studied it and spent time in it, you're always going to hear something new. You're going to get some new information in.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
was. Yeah, and I'm kind of a nerd that way, so I was very excited when I realized they made a different sound.
Yeah, I bet. A new thing in your catalog, right? File that away.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. What would you say makes it possible for you to keep coming back year after year? It sounds like a pretty intense process. Like what inspires you to keep returning?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. I liked what I'm doing, but there's a whole series of reasons probably. First of all, I think Pepperwood is an awesome place.
Oh.
It's a great thing
agree.
they have here. It's a wonderful property, and the science, the studies and things they're doing here, I think are just fantastic, and they need to be done. So I'm glad someone's doing them. I'm just excited to be able to participate a little bit and help. I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I do know birds. So I'm happy that I can do that one thing. So yeah, I like doing that. Sometimes if it's raining out and you're looking at it kind of going, well, shoot. But usually we postpone that. And so it can be difficult to find a time that works for everybody in the group to come up. But that's the hardest thing. I mean, once you're up here and doing it, you're doing it, and it's a nice day. So
Excellent.
We always enjoy it.
It truly does sound like a nice day, and data collection should be a pleasure if possible. We love that our diligent volunteers enjoy their time out on the reserve. But there are outcomes to this work that go far beyond a series of pleasant spring mornings communing with our avian neighbors. Once Sean and his fellow birders complete their data sheets, our science team can use them to gain insights into the population dynamics of our local species and track how ecosystems respond to stewardship interventions, disturbances, climate change, a myriad of other variables. Michelle Halbur, Pepperwood's Ecology Research Manager, was kind enough to join us again on the podcast to discuss what happens to the breeding bird survey data once it has been collected.
Well, one thing to remember is data is on a piece of paper. So quite literally, we take that paper, we scan it, we process it, digitize it, which is basically entering it into a computer.
Sure.
And then we run all kinds of algorithms to see, what are the outputs, what are the trends, what are the patterns over time with our bird populations. Birds are indicators of ecosystem health. They really give us a sense of how, intact habitats are supporting them or not, whether disturbance cycles like fire or grazing are supporting them or not. And so all this great data that our volunteers are collecting, becomes useful when we can finally look at it and start pulling together the information to tell stories about, what these birds might be experiencing or expressing. So for example, birds, they are indicators of, how well ecosystems are supporting them, whether we see a lot of different birds or maybe, large abundances of birds or not. They can tell us things about predator-prey relationships, such as, if there's a really good mouse year, let's say, or small rodent year, in a year or two, we might all of a sudden see a lot more hawks flying overhead, which we do see. The data might tell us about disease cycles, like avian influenza might be impacting certain species like corvids more than others, corvids being crows, ravens, jays.
And that seems like information that regionally would be really important.
Right. And so, birds might not just be increasing over time or decreasing over time, but going up and down with these different disease and predator-prey relationships. But ultimately at Pepperwood, we're monitoring our birds to really get a sense of how our land stewardship is doing. Are we achieving the goals and objectives of supporting native biodiversity that we're aiming for? So for example, we do a lot of grazing in our grasslands, right? We do have a conservation grazing program which I talk about.
You sure did. We got to talk about that quite a lot. That was awesome.
In a prior podcast. And there's actually a grassland associated species called western meadowlark. Have you ever seen western meadowlarks?
I have heard western meadowlarks. As a matter of fact, you have also heard Western Meadowlarks if you have heard our previous episodes of the podcast. The Western Meadowlark song was the subject of a Season 1 Nature Sound Guess Who game prompt. I won't spoil which one, but this is the striking, characteristic song of the Western Meadowlark. Such a wonderful, complex vocalization, and Michelle recommends looking as well as listening for them.
This is an amazing bird. If you haven't seen one, I highly recommend looking them up online. There's a great website. eBird is a great resource for data and information about birds. During the breeding season, they have this brilliant yellow chest that really is striking, and they tend to flock in the grasslands. So if you're, like us, we drive our little 4-wheel drives along the roads at Pepperwood, and I just love watching the flocks of birds kind of fly out from in front of the vehicle. Love it. But this bird, Western Meadowlark, is a ground nesting bird, so it produces its nests under large bunches of perennial bunchgrass, or like under little shrubs, or things like gum plant. If you know grindelia, they're often found under there. And another thing that really matches its name, gum plant, very gummy, very sticky. Yeah, it's a fun one. And then, I should step back in that there is the North American Breeding Bird Survey, which is, an international program focused in the North American continent. And their point counts that they have are very similar to ours. So our project is basically designed to be similar to theirs, so we can compare our results at Pepperwood with their results. And unfortunately, their program, since it was started in 1966, has detected significant declines in Western Meadowlark populations in California, especially in the Central Valley, primarily due to grassland habitat loss.
Right. So all those grasslands are not really grasslands anymore, right?
Right. And so this bird is being directly impacted, and we are detecting that in the international data. But here at Pepperwood, we started our program in 2007. We have about 900 acres of, wide open grasslands that we're actively grazing. We're actively burning it, and to control for invasive weeds. And even though this is a ground nesting bird that could be impacted by cows walking around or fire moving through, we are detecting significant increases at Pepperwood every year by about 4% per year, which is really quite astounding and speaks directly to us, keeping our grassland habitats intact and keeping those, really important disturbance cycles happening for the grassland community.
Well, that's one of those incredible counterintuitive feelings, right? We think that by introducing disturbance, a ground nesting bird would have a decrease or, be threatened by that. But in fact, those disturbance cycles are actually supporting that species specifically.
Absolutely. And, we do things like rotate cattle and give different areas rest periods, or we don't burn everywhere all the time, right? So we're building in kind of this heterogeneous stewardship and impact, which allows these animals to move around and be supported.
Well, tremendous.
Yeah.
All right, so Western Meadowlarks are increasing, right? And
yes.
we can trace the difference, at least between us stewarding grasslands as opposed to developing grasslands. That's a potential cause that we can feel pretty good about. Any other things that we've seen over the past several years?
Yes, some other interesting stories that have come out of the data have to do with our recent wildfires, the Tubbs and Kincaid fires of 2017 and 2019. So different birds are apparently, being differently affected by wildfires. Mm-hmm. So there are two birds that I'm going to talk about that are kind of having opposite responses to these fires. One is called a wren-tit, and these are little brown birds that are associated with shrubby chaparral habitats in coastal California. And this is a quote I'm actually going to read from Cornell Labs. I love their website with all the information. Mm-hmm. I love this quote. Wren-tits are homebodies and may be the most sedentary bird species in North America. They rarely travel more than 1,300 feet from where they were born. So basically, these are little brown birds that hang out, defend maybe like a 1 or 2 acre area their entire lives. They mate for life. They're just chill. And actually, they're not really chill, because when you hear them, they're very active in that they constantly call all day long, and they sound like a little ping pong ball dropping. Bup, 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 bup.
That was a pretty great approximation of a wren tit by Michelle, but let's hear a recording of that same vocalization. And they can make a neat little rattle sound as well. So keep your ears open for those sounds next time you're out walking through a shrubby chaparral habitat. Okay, back to Michelle's story about how our data on wren tits demonstrated a distinct change following the Tubbs wildfire in 2017.
And so working here at Pepperwood, we have a bunch of chaparral right in front of the Dwight Center and the barn where a lot of people congregate. And almost every day I would hear them out there, doing their ping pong call. But after the Tubbs fire, we heard barely anything. And the chaparral in particular, it's a habitat that, these plants, these shrubs that are there, the grasses that are there, are really... They burn hot, and basically our chaparral went from, thick cover of shrubs to just black open space.
Well, I'm thinking about the way the Tubbs fire moved over the Pepperwood property in particular, like the area near the Dwight Center where we had a chaparral habitat, that was really the hottest part of the fire. Is that correct?
Yeah, at least within the vegetation types at Pepperwood.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is the area, the entrance to the preserve is one of the areas that burned during the initial high wind fire event.
Right.
And burned very hot.
Compared to even how that particular fire, and as a wildfire, it wasn't at the levels we would have wanted it for, like a controlled burn. It was already a hot fire, but especially during that big wind event in the entrance to Pepperwood, it was like especially hot, so it consumed more than we ever would have wanted it to, right?
Absolutely. That's actually a good point, because our prescribed burning, even within chaparral habitats, does not take that ecosystem from, dense cover to no cover. Right. We can have good fire on the ground and really control, and have it be more of a mosaic of impact to maintain habitat. Because what we saw basically from the data and our own observations in not hearing them is that our detections of wren tits from the point count surveys went from about 10 to 12 per year. And then right after Tubbs, we only detected 2.
Wow.
In the entire season. The following year, 1. In 2020, 0. In 2021, 0. And that's not to say, there might have been some out there that we didn't detect. Maybe they moved to neighboring properties. That's the hope. Right. They are these homebodies, but they can move, they can fly. So that's the hope, is that they got to a place of safety. But we didn't detect them for a couple years. And then in 2022, about 5 years after the fire, all of a sudden we detected 3. And then in 2024, we detected 8. So they're slowly coming back.
They kind of repopulate the area as that vegetation finally recovers from this sort of catastrophic event.
Exactly.
So the wren tits sound like they, I often think about wildfire impacts. The human impacts were like the most intense, right? So we lost our homes because we're kind of like wren tits, right? We have very specific homes and, sort of locations that we spend time in. So the wren tits and the humans kind of had a similar experience where we had really big impacts, and then it took us a couple of years to recover. So
absolutely. Yeah. And people are still recovering. So it is something to watch over time. On the other hand, so wren tits, of course, had this decrease post-fire, but are now recovering. Whereas the opposite we saw in lazuli buntings. Lazuli buntings are this beautiful migratory bird. The breeding males are almost like a brilliant turquoise blue on their head, wings, and back. And they have this splash of orange on their upper chest. They're just really stunning.
And as we've already heard this episode, lazuli buntings have a lovely song. Let's hear it again.
This is a migratory bird that travels from Mexico in winter to California in April through summer.
So they could not be more different from a wren tit. They really travel.
Right. They like to fly around. And we're so lucky to have them here during the breeding season when they have their brilliant colors. Now, lazuli buntings are known as a post-fire specialist or fire follower, meaning that their abundances often increase in areas that were recently burned. And folks think that this might be because they're often kind of on woodland edges. They like open forest canopy, more open shrublands, and they eat a lot of insects, which there's often kind of a surgence of insects after fire, like your bark beetles and things like that.
So there's like kind of some special resources available in a post-fire landscape that lazuli buntings can really take advantage of.
Right. And so it attracts them to those areas. And so what we saw is the abundance of lazuli buntings increased after both the Tubbs and Kincaid fires. In 2007 to 14, we saw about 1 to 10 detections per year. So it wasn't really consistent, but we could have a few detections to up to around 10. But in the years prior to Tubbs, in 2015 to 2017, it was a peak drought and we detected no lazuli buntings at all. So because there was a drought, we were concerned, like, is the drought impacting them? This is a migratory bird. So, is something happening here at Pepperwood that's not attracting them? Are we not supporting them? Or maybe is something happening, in Mexico along its flight route? So these international migratory birds, you really have to think beyond the property that you're at. It really connects us across space. And remarkably, after the Tubbs fire, the spring after, we saw double the number of lazuli buntings that we normally detect in our sampling. We saw about 15 to 20 per year for 4 years following these fires. So they stuck around. And then in 2022, so about 3 years after the Kincaid fire, we're back to business with just a few detections per year.
Okay.
So there was this kind of upswing, from nothing to double what we normally see. And now activity is kind of dying down again.
So there's almost opposite cycles for these two birds in this post-fire environment, right? So for some species, especially a really catastrophic fire, doesn't seem like it really attracts them or supports the habitat where they want to stay. And then other birds come in and say, oh, this is a place that I can take advantage of these new conditions.
Right.
Wow.
It's quite exciting to watch. And that's why we have long-term data, right? Because if I just sampled for a couple years, I'm not going to have these patterns or trends become apparent at all.
Well, this is the beauty of a long-term study that doesn't have like one specific, tactic in mind, right? We didn't know the fires were going to come through here. So you had years of data prior to the fire already tracking what the populations or what at least the behavior was demonstrating. And then when the fire came, you said, aha, now we can actually track how things are going to go during, after, and in the several years after. So that's really exciting.
It is super exciting. And one thing that we're really excited about moving forward is we're starting to use more audio recorders to automatically detect bird song, and then we can use computers to identify them.
Is that going to replace our volunteer project?
Absolutely not. The point count is very important. We have, like you said, this long-term data set. It's also a standardized protocol, right, that we can compare to this international program. However, these more automated formats, we can put more recorders out there 24/7, different times of the year where we might have different groups of migrating birds moving through. And also we're thinking, or we are, I should say, going to get what's called a MODIS tower. And MODIS is spelled MOTUS.
If you're like me and you're accustomed to encountering acronyms, you might be wondering what MOTIS stands for. But it turns out that MOTIS is not an acronym. It is a Latin word meaning movement, which makes sense based on what it helps scientists track. Migratory species that move over the landscape.
We're fundraising right now to help install and support this MODIS tower, which is part of an international tracking network for birds, bats, and even monarch butterflies.
Wow.
So all these animals that are tagged as they fly through get picked up by these towers, and it turns into this beautiful international data set.
So I think this is something that Ryan Farrell mentioned back in our episode when we were talking about what a sentinel site is and the idea that MODIS towers are considered to be a standard part of sentinel sites in so many ways, as a Sentinel site, we go above and beyond Sentinel site. But this was one element of Sentinel sites that we had not had previously. And you seem like you're talking about it with a little more certainty. So this is a thing that's going to happen.
It is going to happen, and we're super excited. And yeah, we have fortunately, Ryan is an expert at installing towers and maintaining technology out in nature with all its challenges. So we're really, really excited. What this tower can do is it fills in a major data gap in coastal California, and it can just even more give us information about how birds are migrating and possibly changing their behavior given land use or climate change or other factors like fire.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. All right. Can't wait to hear about some of the stories that Motus Tower starts to tell us.
Yeah.
When that comes to pass. Michelle, this is really exciting stuff. Thank you so much for walking us through a little bit about what we've learned about birds through this. The data collection process sounded like so much fun, but I wonder if the data analysis, at least in its results, is kind of a fun process for you as well.
Oh, absolutely. It makes the field work come into more of a digital form, but then become a reality and a story we can tell over time, which is just it. That's really why I love my job, is seeing the results of all this hard work. And we could not do it without all of our fabulous volunteers.
Absolutely. Going out there, taking that data. All right. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a pleasure to hear from Michelle about the insights we can gain about bird populations from the Breeding Birds Survey Project. Sean made it clear that he and his fellow volunteers deeply value the analysis results as well.
I would imagine that by seeing the overall big picture trends, they can start understanding better, what may be happening, whether it's habitat, whether it's climate, whether it's something else going on, disease, who knows. But they can then devise strategies maybe for making things better, or maybe things are getting better and they can at least report on that. So, well,
one way or the other, they can't predict or track that unless they have these numbers.
Unless you're doing the science.
Unless you're collecting that information, which is what you're doing, which is so great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it's an enjoyable process for you while you're going along as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I do it. It's because I do enjoy the birds a lot.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean. This was really interesting, and I really appreciate you talking to us.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thanks again to Sean and to all of our volunteer birding experts on the Breeding Birds Survey team. They bring an amazing skill set and invaluable time and dedication to Pepperwood. Thanks also to Michelle for shedding some light on what we've learned from this data. We have so many resources to share with you this episode, so please check out the show notes for some links. First, please help fund our incoming Motus Tower, follow the link to our donation page, and join one of Pepperwood's circles of giving. Cornell Lab has a variety of resources that will help you learn more about birds. We'll have a link to the Macaulay Library, the source of the many sound clips we heard this episode and previous episodes. Check out all of those contributors at the Macaulay Library link, or you can hear highlighted recordings at the All About Birds website, where you can search specific bird species or review which birds live in your area. The Macaulay Library database is part of what drives the phone application that Sean described using to learn bird calls. It's called Merlin Bird ID. So follow that link to download it to your smartphone and start learning for yourself. In addition to our own in-house analysis, Pepperwood's breeding bird survey data is uploaded to Cornell Lab's eBird, a community science database where you can upload your own observations by joining eBird. You can follow that link to learn more. Our data is also uploaded to the Environmental Data Initiative, an avian knowledge network. You can learn more about those at their links. And finally, as promised at the top of the episode, we will include a link to the West Sonoma County Christmas bird count, where Nicole Barden first met Sean and invited him to join us at Pepperwood. So many cool bird resources to explore, but don't switch off yet. It's time for this episode's installment of The Nature Sound Guess Who Game. Each episode, we play a nature sound for you and challenge you to guess which critter made that sound. If you email your guess to podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org, you may become podcast famous with a shout out on the next episode when the answer is revealed. We didn't receive any guesses on last episode's sound. I'm afraid I may have intimidated you all from guessing by hinting that it was tricky. Let's listen back to last episode's mystery sound now. And that sound was made by the Steller's jay. Yes, indeed, the Steller's jay, Cyanoceta stellarii. Did you think it sounded like a red-tailed hawk? That's just what the Steller's jay wanted you to think. This clever jay species can be a master imitator and has been known to imitate not only other wild birds, but also squirrels, cats, dogs, chickens, and even some mechanical objects. Here's a medley of calls selected from Macaulay Library's collection of Steller's jay vocalizations. The Steller's jay is no slouch in the looks department either. It is a large jay with a blue lower body and a charcoal black crested head. It is one of only 2 North American jay species with a crest on its head. The other one is called simply blue jay, or Cyanoceta cristata. These 2 crested jays have historically split North America, with the blue jay being found in the east and the Steller's jay in the west. Blue jay populations are more recently expanding westward, and where the 2 species overlap, they have been known to interbreed and produce hybrid offspring. The Steller's jay gets its current name from George Wilhelm Steller, a German naturalist. A North American species named after a European adventurer who encountered them in the 18th century. This is a very common occurrence, both for birds and other taxa, and it's an artifact of the history of colonization and the cultural erasure of the indigenous communities who have shared a home with these species for thousands of years. There is a substantial and increasingly accepted movement to correct this practice, known as Bird Names for Birds. We'll include a link to the Bird Names for Birds website, as well as an excellent article from the American Birding Association called Bird Names for the 21st Century, written by Ashwin Sivakumar. The article features the Steller's jay and some of its alternative common names, like pine jay, mountain jay, and long-crested jay. Now, it's time to hear our new mystery sound that you can try to guess before next time. Now, this bird-obsessed episode would not be complete without one more recording from Cornell Lab Macaulay Library, so I will give you the hint that it's definitely a bird. After this one, we're going to take a break from birds and explore some other taxa for the rest of the season, but let's see if this little bird sounds familiar to you. Here it comes in 3, 2, 1. And here's your second chance to listen in 3, 2, 1. Okay, folks, who's that bird? Email your guess to us at podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org. Until next episode, thanks for listening, and don't forget to keep your ears tuned into nature.